Every time that I'm playing the Spires game mode, whether I'm streaming or I'm making content or I'm watching somebody else, inevitably, whether it's towards me or another person, the question gets asked, how do you loot? And this matters because you can't fix the first thing that really good players known as sharks in the community have, which is excellent team fighting, a good sense of positioning, enough cooldown management, and just the ability to press buttons in a tactical sense. But in the Spires game mode, you can absolutely control what you're literally leaving on the floor. You can bring better items into the fight with you. You can arm yourself in such a way that you are equipping yourself and giving yourself a loadout that is capable of fighting against these players. And if you know these concepts and apply them, and I'll give you some examples, you will be able to beat people who are not using these concepts, not applying them. And also, it'll be a team-wide buff, because if you understand these concepts in Spires as a 3v3 mode, you can disseminate that wisdom to other people on your team and help them out if they're looking a little shaky or lost in what they're doing, and give them feedback on a loadout. So the first thing we're going to talk about is crowd control. This is the ability to make sure that your opponent doesn't have access to the full range of their abilities and their movement. This is important because crowd control allows us to combo onto one player. If we defeat that player and then none of our teammates get killed, then we are in a 3v2, and the action economy of the game, something that you're very familiar with if you're from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, comes into play. We just have more buttons, more resources. Becomes extremely hard for the 2 people to beat 3 people if there's anything like an equal balance in skill. So crowd control can be 2 things. The first is hard CC. This is called something that just ties someone down intensely. A root, a stun, something that displaces people to a known location where they are not capable of using movement and or their abilities. This is essential because it leads to combos. It makes it easier for our teammates to say, oh, that person is in trouble, jump that person, get on top of them, do extra damage to them. If you have soft crowd control, something like a Grimfall ultimate, then you don't guarantee that any one person is locked up. You don't guarantee that's impossible for them to get away, but they might have to burn extra cooldowns, or they might be in a precarious circumstance. Now, the second thing that we're going to use is mobility. Mobility is the ability to get away from an opponent's crowd control. Crowd control is the most important thing to have. Mobility is the second most, because when we use our crowd control and it's on cooldown, we want to make sure that we're not victimized by our opponent's crowd control. So something like a sumo run-free amulet is very good for mobility because it allows us to get out of an area. It also has steadfast, which you need to start thinking about in terms of mobility. Yes, the dual axes are not very good. The right click on them, giving them steadfast, means that you can get away from a lot of abilities. That doesn't mean the dual axis is good, but that means that it is its relative place, right? The ability to dash extra times, or in Grimvald's case, the ability to press the E button and then teleport to a location. This is why you see a lot of Dala, because the Dala crown allows you to vanish, and then you are invulnerable, intangible, and have accelerated movement speed towards a given location, and you're invisible to opponents. All of these things are mobility. The bonus movement speed, but also the inability to be seen, is a pseudo form of mobility. The third thing we're going to talk about now is going to be mitigation. Mitigation just says you don't have your crowd control and you don't have the mobility to get away. Someone is on top of you. How do you make sure you don't die? And so mitigation, this is why you see so much invulnerability amulet being run inside of Spires. You go to the shrine, you pay 50 of your shards. You have so many shards, you can afford so much in terms of your fragments. And just for 50 of that 1,200, 1/24th of the cost, about 4%, something like that, of your total revenue, you can have an amulet that says you are just flatly invulnerable for 2 seconds. You see some people are running the resilience crown, right? Or the crown that gives them 70% damage mitigation for a period of time as they're being attacked. You see some people that are unironically and purposefully picking up the shield. All of these things are mitigation. Mitigation is a soft counter to your opponent's crowd control, because if your opponent uses crowd control on you for the sake of comboing you, damaging you, getting on top of you, blowing you up, and taking you out of the fight, and you have something that says, I take less damage, then you're going to be in a wonderful position, because all their cooldowns are going to be up, you're not going to die, and then your team gets to turn the fight. This is a lot of why the majority of very powerful Shattered builds include Renji, because it turns out actually that picking up the Fortitude shards on top of having that 40% damage mitigation when you're at low health means you have a lot of mitigation that is not even tied to an ability, not tied to an item, and not tied to a button. And that's why you see a lot of Renji. Now, the fourth thing, and this will seem counterintuitive, is that we're now finally getting to damage, because it turns out that when you are playing Spires, you are dumping CC chains on top of other people to get them low, and you figure that if 3 of you focus one target, it doesn't matter if your damage is too bad. But damage is a factor. Damage does affect things like a one-person lunging hook on a Donnie that's only hitting one person, that's getting terrible DPS, or the Snecklin, which is a fantastic crowd control weapon for Hollow, but does terrible damage and is extremely lowly rated. But so you need some damage so that you have an ability to capitalize on top of the crowd control that you're dishing out. And so this is where you see people do things like they'll play a set of Rava, even though it's not fantastic for them because the bonus damage on all ranged and projectiles is fantastic. You see a lot of Hollow set bonuses or Subo set bonuses because these give plus 20% damage when you have Fortitude, or plus 70% damage if your health is low. This is where Sushi becomes extremely powerful, because notice, we just by set bonuses have the mitigation of Rinchi, right? That's the third most important thing. And then we also at low health have access to all of the Subo Endling passive bonus plus 70% damage. Now, the fifth and final thing is going to be healing. Now, this is going to be a trap that a lot of new players are going to fall into, because they're going to think that healing is of the highest priority. It gets the most work done. If I take damage, I can get my get back. But I want you to understand that healing is much worse in Arkheron than making sure the other team, the other players, don't have any more actions because they're knocked down or dead, right? It is incredibly misleading to look at something like a Hollow Crown, or sometimes even something like a Grimwald passive or a Vatan passive, and think this is it, I'm just going to heal through everything. Healing is not as powerful as the other items that I have listed up here. It can be a factor in a strong build, and that's why you do see a lot of shattered Vatan builds run around inside of Spires, but it's not as important as, say, damage mitigation. So for instance, something like a Kariv Crown, which just drops a 40% damage reduction totem for you and your teammate, is far more powerful because mitigation is a stronger concept than something like a Hollow Crown, which does summon 2 Gloomies next to you and will heal you and your allies, but the healing is minuscule relative to just not taking that damage in the first place. And so I hope that by following these 5 ideas, you get a better sense of what is inside of Spires. This will explain if you are watching the POV of someone who is a shark on your team, or if you are watching the enemy team, or if you're judging what they have, take note of what kinds of things they tend to have. Why is Rinchi so commonly played? Because he has 3 hard crowd controls and a soft crowd control, and I've said that's the most important thing in the game. So that explains a lot. Why is a lot of Hollow played? Because she offers soft CC, and she happens to have some healing, yes, but mostly her set bonus gives her bonus damage. And so the ease of her kit is taken out of having to press items to do things and is passively given in terms of set bonuses. This is why you see some set bonuses are not given a whole lot of consideration, but also you see other things like, why is full Dala really good in Spires? Because Dala's ultimate is hard crowd control. Her dagger for piercing is good damage and hard crowd control. She has an amazing ability to get out of damage with mobility, and I've already told you she has 2 things that are at the top of the list and another thing that's second on the list. We can understand why full Dala would feel really strong. So take these concepts, apply them in Spires, look at them in this order. Again, crowd control, mobility, mitigation, damage, healing, in that order. You want to prioritize the top of the list. And as a final note, something for those of you who've stuck around a little bit to think on, you don't just want all of one thing. So you do get diminishing returns the more of something that you have. So the more hard CC that you have, but if it's at the cost of it being a Snecklin and not having a whole lot of damage, you do start having depreciating returns, because now the roles that you are not picking up individually have to be given to your team. And if you want to climb, if you want to ascend, you want to go further up the tower, you want to burn fewer of your lives, you have to assume, unless you are playing on an organized team, that you have to understand these concepts, you have to be self-sufficient, you have to put all of these things together yourself, and maybe if you can help your teammates do that, you'll be able to go further up in Spires. I hope this gives you some confidence going to the Spires game mode for community night, and I'll see you in the river.